Coming up on Need to Know Rochester, this community has a long tradition as a great community for people who are deaf or hard of hearing. Institutions like NTID attract and produce talented graduates. Now there are questions about whether the region's businesses can make the most of their talents. We'll find out if we're witnessing talent drain. That story, plus the business section next on Need to Know Rochester.
Rochester's news magazine since 1997. This is Need to Know Rochester.
Thanks for joining us. I'm Elisa Orlando. Much of the mainstream news coverage about the deaf and hard of hearing communities focuses on new technologies. But this week, Need to Know is covering an economic issue that's vitally important to those who can't hear or have trouble hearing. Research by the American Community Survey shows that just under 20,000 deaf and hard of hearing people make Rochester their home. That's around 3.7% of the population and slightly above the national average. But with signs of slow economic recovery, some members of that community are worried that skilled deaf and hard of hearing graduates might miss out on opportunities as companies could overlook them in their hiring. WXXI's Innovation Trail reporter Kate O'Connell has been looking at this issue.
This is a familiar sight in Rochester. The interactions of the deaf and hard of hearing communities are commonplace and a part of the city's culture.
I think that the deaf and hearing communities are more sharing the responsibility of communication here in Rochester than in other cities. The communication burden is not only on me, and here you don't have to educate the hearing community as much because they're already aware of it.
Alicia Lane Outlaw is the CCO of All Out Marketing, a company that opened offices here about 2 years ago that employs local deaf graduates.
What's different about Rochester I'm seeing is that more people here have exposure to the deaf community. And the talent is right there in their own backyard, graduating from NTID, because the deaf community here is so large. Deaf people do want to live here. They want to stay here.
But Lane Outlaw says companies in the city are not taking advantage of local talent. And as a result, many highly trained deaf grads are moving away to find work. President of the National Technical Institute for the Deaf, Jerry Buckley, says it can be harder for deaf and hard of hearing graduates to find jobs here. But it hasn't always been that way.
We had a whole generation of deaf and hard of hearing professionals who've graduated with skills. Many of them previously went out to work for the same large companies that traditionally have hired young people. And in the last 8 to 10 years, as the economy has been challenged, those companies have shrunk in size.
Buckley says NTID is now focusing on educating the smaller companies in Rochester about the quality of their graduates and how easy it can be to employ someone who's deaf or hard of hearing.
Our responsibility is to show them that we have skilled workers who can come into the workplace, compete, produce products, and that the additional cost is not going to be something that's going to impair their business model.
He says the long history of deaf education and community in Rochester means many of their grads want to stay. Sometimes, though, they have to make a tough decision, like all young graduates.
Rochester is the #1 city in the world for deaf people to live. Everyone wants to stay here. And as the economy has struggled, job opportunities have changed. And I understand some of the disappointment of needing to leave and go someplace else. But often young people have to do that to start their career and get the experience.
The population of post-secondary students in Rochester that are deaf or hard of hearing far exceeds national levels. But out of the 40 companies represented at NTID's latest job fair, only 4 or 5 were local. Not everyone is discouraged, though.
There are plenty of opportunities. I know if I do find a job, if it's a big enough company, they should be able to conform with the Americans with Disabilities Act, so I shouldn't have any issues.
Stephanie Miller is a science student at RIT NTID. She wants to stay in Rochester and she's confident she'll be able to find work when the time comes. Fellow student Monica Wilmot already has a job lined up, but she says she was nervous when she first started looking.
At first, I was worried that I might have a hard time finding a job here myself. Luckily, somebody suggested that I participate in something called the Workforce Recruitment Program. It's called WRP.
WRP is an assistance program for people with disabilities. And Monica says it provided the helping hand she needed to find a local job. Jerry Buckley says NTID graduates have a lot to offer and could contribute to the region's economic recovery if given the chance. He's hopeful that a change is not far away.
I'm very, very hopeful as the economy comes back, especially here in Western New York and in the Rochester region, that deaf people will have an equal opportunity to participate in that economic recovery through employment in professional fields.
For Need to Know Rochester, I'm Kate O'Connell.
And just to follow up on that report, we are now joined by members of Rochester's deaf and hard of hearing community. We're going to talk about this issue from a variety of perspectives. Adriana Smart works at All Out Marketing. She's the marketing director there and has experience in a range of corporate settings, including Birds Eye Foods and Excellus, Blue Cross Blue Shield. Davin Searles is with us. He's the executive director of the nonprofit organization called Discovering Deaf Worlds that advocates for deaf and hard of hearing people in the developing world. Thank you very much for being here, Davin and Adriana. And Brian Milburn is a lecturer at NTID. He has an interest in encouraging entrepreneurship among NTI graduates. Thanks for your time. And I'm going to start with you, Brian. In your opinion, we heard in that story about what could be happening in the Rochester area in terms of the economy. Do you think that young people are leaving the area, deaf and hard of hearing community members are leaving the area?
Oh, definitely. And as far as the Generation Y goes, many are leaving Rochester. They graduate from RIT and NTID, and there's nothing there for them. So they're not interested in staying in Rochester for that reason, so they're leaving by the mass.
Is it strictly because of jobs? Two questions. Is it strictly because of jobs that you think that's happening? And also, there's been a lot of flight in general in the upstate area by young people. So is this also just part of that same migration trend of young people getting educated here and then leaving?
Yeah, I think it can be both hearing and deaf that way, in that situation. Because it can be related to jobs, but it can also be related to, Rochester has a lot of car issues here. We've got a lot of problems, and Gen Y are kind of resistant to cars. I think that, we have the hearing and the deaf worlds both seeing these issues.
All right, Adriana Smart, talk about this from a corporate perspective a little bit. You're in the corporate world and have a long history in the corporate world. Do you feel that you face resistance, that the deaf and hard of hearing community members face resistance from employers in a stressful economic situation? Do you think that's happening here?
Yes, I do. Many companies right now are facing issues in figuring out how to get the quality of applicants raised. And they're finding that in the deaf and hard of hearing community, there are many qualified people, but they're hidden. They're not visible to the major corporations. And so in the large corporations, it's important to get them aware of these people being on the market and to be open to hiring them, to set up maybe networking sites here in Rochester for people to be able to get out and meet people. And deaf and hard of hearing people should be able to do that as well and figure out a good way to strategize to make that happen.
So you're saying the issue is really more of an issue of getting good candidates in front of employers. It's not that employers are reluctant. Is that fair to say?
I would say that large companies, they're facing a large group of qualified candidates, and who they hire, I think, is more of a challenge for them to pick among those many qualified candidates. So I'm not sure if they're resisting hard of hearing people in that way specifically, but I think it's just very confusing right now because of the great number of candidates in front of them.
As a member of the business community, what do you hear? What do you hear from people? What do they say about companies say about struggling with this? Do they talk to you about it?
Can you repeat your question? The large companies, they're struggling with what
yes,
exactly?
Yes, when you were at Birds Eye, when you were at Excellus and other local companies, did people express their struggle to find candidates, relate to candidates, and then work really hard to make sure that they have the diversity in their workforce of deaf and hard of hearing people? Is it a struggle for them?
Well, they're trying to find qualified candidates to fill their positions. a deaf person, it can be a larger challenge for them, and to be able to market themselves more to actually be seen as a qualified candidate.
All right, Devin, let me talk to you about this a little bit. Your organization works a lot in an international context. And of course, when people are young and they're just out of school, most of our story has been focusing on recent graduates. The sensibility about getting out into the world, about traveling, about moving around a little bit. I guess my question is it such a bad thing for somebody to leave their community when they're right out of school and gain some other experience? Why is the issue of employment so important in this community?
See, I'm a big believer of world experience, getting out into the world and experiencing it, seeing it. And I think some people leaving, it's not necessarily a bad thing. The thing is, do they come back? That's kind of the key question here, because it seems that they're not really motivated to come back again. Rochester has a wonderful community here. And you can meet a variety of people in the store. Some people who sign, some people who just fingerspell, some people who sign wonderfully. So again, we have that aspect, but as far as the jobs are concerned, people coming back, it's kind of iffy.
All right. Do you think there's a certain time in their life when they may consider coming back? Is it more about life stage, or is it about the community itself, the things that it has to offer beyond just for the deaf and hard of hearing communities?
I think it depends on myself, because I grew up in Rochester and I did leave after college, and I never thought I would come back myself to Rochester as well. It's kind of the same old story. Someone who leaves home, they're like, oh, I've had enough of that place, but then they come back and they realize, setting up this non-for-profit international organization, having places in DC and other places like that where we're set, but having a home base, having my roots here, that really beats New York City. It beats DC, having this home. So that's my reason for coming back.
All right. Adriana, let me ask you another question about employment now. You mentioned that employers are looking for the most qualified candidates. Are there misperceptions about how to find qualified candidates and how to get to people that may be qualified who are deaf and hard of hearing? Do you sense that businesses may have misconceptions about what it's like to work with or have a deaf or hard of hearing person on staff?
I think some companies do have misconceptions to work with deaf and hard of hearing people. They're not sure how to communicate fluently and to make it happen smoothly in the workplace, how this person will fit into the company culture. I think they need to realize that when they hire someone who has a different culture, to learn to understand it. To help the communication become smoother, you learn about that person. And each person is very different and unique, so having a diverse population in your company helps your company to grow. It helps them open up to realize that hiring someone adds so many different perspectives to your organization, and it can help to address problems that may arise from a different point of view.
How have you experienced in your work experience, have you experienced that growth, that getting to know somebody, that getting to know each other, and that sort of growth within a company?
Well, it's been a great opportunity for me to go into various companies where I've worked and network, and learning to talk with people in the different areas within the company, having to work on teams, working cross-functioning groups. And the opportunity is right there in front of you. You have to be open to it. You have to learn to function on the team and take those opportunities as they come. Learn to use email if you don't yet. Open up that way of communication with others in the company. I think that's great. And also, if they offer any kind of volunteer type things, if you join in that group, you are open to new opportunities within the company and working with people you may not have had the opportunity before. So I think problems can be solved much easier when you're more open to communicating with people in any way you can.
Right, so even as a job candidate, it's important probably to say, I really want to get involved, just like any other candidate.
Exactly. Be active. Get in there, roll up your sleeves. And if you're qualified, they should hire you, definitely.
All right, Brian, you're on the ground at NTID. We heard some cautious optimism from the students who were in the story that Kate reported about job prospects. But we also know that many graduates are becoming more entrepreneurial in general. They're getting online startups. They're working in an area to try and encourage each other and to become more entrepreneurial. How do you feel about that issue at NTID and among graduates from there? How do you encourage entrepreneurship just as it's encouraged in every other community?
Well, I think encouraging entrepreneurship for deaf people in Rochester is a wonderful thing. Because, again, we have, furthering them to become more, it will help Rochester as well. It invests in their own entrepreneurship. It helps them. It really makes a big impact on the Rochester area as well. Having deaf people choose to stay, that's another wonderful thing. And Rochester has a wonderful deaf community. We have this here with a lot of hearing people who know how to work with deaf people. And so that way we don't have as many missed opportunities.
All right, let's talk a little bit about technology. This is for any of you that want to answer it. How has technology helped any of you overcome obstacles that you might have faced in your business and in your careers? Adriana?
Using technology has helped me overcome many issues. Technology has helped me in many aspects of my job, from communication to sharing information with people to finding people like myself who are comfortable using technology and open to using it. It helps the communication process go smoothly. You find ways to help one another. Technology can help you with your projects at work as well.
Devin?
Yeah, I'd like to add that technology really does make situations that people think of that would be impossible, possible.
Give me an example.
For example, we have deaf truck drivers who, traditionally use CBs, but we have text messaging now, which makes that pretty much equal. Another important part of this too is not just technology, but also humans who use the technology being willing to try it, and that way we can be be in good communication with each other and have that success.
All right, this is a question for either Devin or Brian. Can you give us a set, and I guess we'll start with Devin because you have an international context. Even though we're struggling here with the economy, we're struggling with jobs, would you say we're better or worse off here than compared to other countries who are producing really skilled deaf and hard of hearing graduates?
Well, as far as other countries are concerned, I've seen some places that are fully owned by, some restaurants that are fully owned by someone's deaf. And again, I've seen a variety of different things. Even in China too, there's a lot of people who are becoming entrepreneurial, and even in other countries too. So I think it's possible that, we do have possibility, we have opportunity here, for deaf waiters, for deaf servers, for, different things. I mean, there is a huge possibility here that we still have.
All right, and you're shaking your head, Brian.
Yes, and again, I've heard of some cities that are big that have, a large population. For example, like in Rochester, we've got a large population, but in other cities, there are no deaf. Like, and if someone from, if you ever go to Sweden, you're like, well, where are the deaf people? You never see them. So we have the city of Rochester be a shining example of what the deaf can do.
All right, and we have about a couple minutes left. Let me just start with Brian. In terms of some of the students that we saw in the story, the people coming out of school, what's your best piece of advice for them in terms of getting themselves in front of employers? What are the biggest hurdles they face, and what would you say to them?
My advice to the students, I would say network as much as possible. Educate other hearing people how to interact the best way with deaf people. And you can even teach some people some sign language. When you meet people, you can teach them some sign language. And honestly, you can also teach other deaf people other signs as well. So I think having these different strategies in mind can help each other and develop these connections, develop employment, and put investment back into the community.
And Devin, you're going like this, and Adriana, you're in agreement too?
Yes. Oh, it's especially when small businesses. We recognize here in Rochester that many of the small businesses are what is helping Rochester to grow and helping the economy here to grow. So if the CEO or someone you meet through networking you can take that opportunity to educate them about deaf graduates, deaf people here who have such great skills and great qualifications, and to help them make creative strategies to help their companies grow. We need to open the businesses to hiring a diverse group of people, to hiring different ability people, to hiring more people for your teams to help your company succeed.
All right, and Adriana, you have the last word. Adriana Smart, Davin Searles, and Brian Milburn, thanks all very much for talking with us today about this issue. Now, we have reached out to the Rochester Business Alliance to get some reaction from the community's business community, and we'll bring you that follow-up story in a future edition of Need to Know. You can also join the conversation at wxxinews.org, where you can leave comments and feedback, and we'd really like to know what you think. Coming up next, the business section with Matt Daneman. Matthew Daneman, business writer for the Democrat and Chronicle, joins us now. And Matt, I want to talk a little bit about the issue that we were just discussing in terms of the deaf and hard of hearing community. You mentioned to me that not in terms of opportunities and hiring possibilities for young people who are deaf and hard of hearing, that's one issue. But what happens in the workplace is also going to be an issue for workplaces in the years to come.
Yeah, you raise a really good point, which is that while we're talking with the NTID folks about college students, really this is an issue that every employer eventually is going to have to deal with, from the very fact that our country is getting grayer. It's getting older. The average age of the population is going up, and the average age of the workforce is also going up. Today, people ages 65 and up represent about 17% of the workforce, either working or looking for work. That's up about 5 percentage points from just 5 years ago. So the average worker is getting more like me, more wrinkly, more gray, and with age comes issues like mobility, comes issues like less hearing. All these sorts of things, all these kinds of accommodations are issues that every workforce and every employer is going to have to start dealing with more and more as more of your population looks more like the country as a whole, as opposed to just, say, fresh-faced 22-year-olds out of RIT. It's interesting, Pittsburgh Workforce Development Agency there just did a big report saying that Pittsburgh, which is a lot like Rochester in a lot of ways, having trouble finding young graduates and young talent for areas, emerging sort of technology areas, and they recommend, one of the things I recommended was try to get more of Pittsburgh's aging workforce re-engaged in these kinds of jobs, like medical technology, things of that nature. I wouldn't be surprised at all if those kinds of dialogues start happening in the Rochester area and Buffalo and Syracuse and all these other graying areas of the country, too.
And I suppose that's good news, though, for students from NTID, young students who may have different kinds of skill set. Maybe there will be more jobs for them in the future, and employers will look to those kinds of places.
Definitely so. You could think of it as competition. Well, if I'm hiring a 65-year-old with hearing, with decreased hearing, maybe that's competition for a deaf or hard hearing student from RIT. Or you could think of it in the way of, as employers get more comfortable of having a more democratic, with a small d, workforce that's more broad-based and representative of the community, it becomes that much easier and the paths get that much more greased for people with differing talents and differing needs to come into the workplace too.
All right, let's switch gears now and talk about a story that you reported earlier this week. This is the difference between $635 million and $70 million. That's the number that the Kodak Retiree Association settled for. And I'm using the word settle. I said, is this like a settlement earlier? And you said, not really. Can you explain what they did?
Sure. Okay. So when Kodak, as of January 1, quit offering health benefits, life insurance benefits, all these sorts of things to its 56,000 some U.S. retirees, what it gave in its place was basically a big IOU saying $635 million to retirees, here's an IOU, so when we, Kodak, come out of bankruptcy, we will pay some percentage of that amount, anywhere from 1 penny on the dollar up to 100% of it, depending on how much of that repayment happens to unsecured creditors during bankruptcy. 100% was very unlikely. Bankruptcies generally don't work that way. If you have the money to pay back all your creditors, why'd you go bankrupt in the first place and declare bankruptcy? What happened this week is that the retiree groups, specifically of unsecured creditors, specifically retirees, took that $635 million claim they had against Kodak and sold it to a broker for $70 million. What it gives retirees and retiree groups is, here's a pot of cash they can use now to start subsidizing retirees' benefits and all the benefits they've lost, help try to at least cut a little bit of that pain that retirees are now feeling out of the pocketbook. It's a calculated gamble because maybe Kodak is going to pay more than 11 cents on the dollar when it actually does pay back its unsecured creditors. On the other hand, you never know.
They want to play it safe.
They want to play
basically.
it safe, and here, according to their financial advisors, here was a good bargain to be had, a good deal to be had of 11 cents on the dollar. You know, if Kodak eventually comes back and pays 9 cents on the dollar, the retirees look like geniuses. And if Kodak comes back eventually, you know, a year from now or months from now, paying 20 cents on the dollar, I'm sure the retirees will be kicking themselves, and there'll be a lot of finger pointing and recriminations. It all remains to be seen.
All right. Thanks very much, Matt, for your time.
It's great to be here.
Appreciate it. Matt Danneman, you can read Matt's business reporting in the Democrat and Chronicle, of course, and you can see him here on Need to Know Rochester each week. Of course, you can also talk to us by emailing us at needtoknow@wxxi.org at any time, and you can keep up with the latest news and analysis on our website, wxxinews.org. I'm Elisa Orlando. Thanks for being with us this week. We'll see you next week on Need to Know Rochester.
Previous Need to Know Rochester broadcasts can be seen if you have Time Warner's on-demand service. Go to Rochester On Demand, channel 111, then look for WXXI News. There you'll find a selection of Need to Know Rochester programs.